Well, my first guest tonight knows a thing or two about taking down failing politicians. He's one of the most colourful and controversial people in American TV news. And when he speaks, millions listen. He's the king of cable news in America and one of the most influential conservatives in the world.
Who are these people? Do they mean us harm? It's not simply a matter of competing for jobs with American citizens. It's potentially a grave threat.
For 5 years and over 1,000 hours of primetime television, Tucker Carlson's been the voice of American outrage. More than 3 million people watch him every night on Fox, where he defies consensus, defies elites, and defies censorship.
It's hard to think of an ideal more American than the freedom of speech.
To the left, he's public enemy number one.
Phrases and ideas that are really core to the racist white nationalist movement.
He wants you to believe the concern about white supremacy in America is a hoax, which is very convenient for a guy whose show has been dabbling in it for years.
For his fans, he's a straight-talking superstar asking the questions nobody dares to ask.
What is this really about? Why do I hate Putin so much? Has Putin ever called me a racist?
Tonight, for once, he's going to be answering my questions, and it's uncensored. Well, I'm delighted to say that Tucker Carlson joins me now. Tucker, thank you so much for joining the show again.
Oh, thanks for having me, Piers.
I want to start by, I've got Mike Tyson on the show after you. Tucker and Tyson, probably the two most infamous American pugilists, only in very different ways. You verbally, him physically. Do you ever think sometimes you're living the life of Mike Tyson with the rough and tumble of American cable news?
No, Mike Tyson plays for keeps. I've always loved Mike Tyson. I'm a boxing fan, and there were a lot of people in the boxing world who were appalled by Mike Tyson because they thought effectively he was too savage. I always admired Mike Tyson's boxing. But no, that's not even. I mean, I work in a very gentlemanly, low-stakes world compared to Mike Tyson.
You know, I watched your show last night, as I often do, and I looked for the devil. I looked for this person that your critics scream about morning, noon, and night, this appalling human being. I didn't find him. I found somebody engaged in spirited opinion, most of which actually last night I happened to agree with. Somebody who was very courteous to his guests, respectful of their opinions, listened to them. Where do you get this reputation from, and do you care?
Well, to answer the second question first, obviously I don't care. I wouldn't be doing it. I care what people I love think of me. I care deeply about it. I'm controlled by, really to a great extent, by my desire to please the people I love. It's not a huge group of people, but I have a lot of children and a wife and friends and staff, and I love them all. And so I do care what they think. I do not care what strangers think. I'm not sure why I should. As for, how I'm perceived, obviously we don't see ourselves clearly. I know you know this very well, having lived in public life for many decades. But from my perspective, I'm very moderate. I don't want radical change of any kind. I'm an American. I've lived here all my life. I always think I liked 1985, for example. This was a happy, prosperous country. People were pretty reasonable. They tolerated disagreement with others. They didn't hate their neighbors because they voted for someone different. And I want to return to that. That's my goal. If that's fascism, okay, fine. But that's what I want. I don't want a revolution at all. I'm the opposite of a revolutionary. I'm temperamentally conservative. I want to conserve the good things about my country. And that's how I feel. And I would say also that in general, I can certainly be a jerk. I have been in public many times, but in general, I like other people and I have no interest in being rude. I believe in politeness. So I don't see myself as a radical, divisive figure in the slightest. I see myself as kind of a moderate, middle-aged guy in a V-neck sweater.
And you sport that sweater very well, Tucker, if I may say so. I want to turn to the state of our two countries, really, because they're joined, I think, in one sense, by two leaders who many people believe have literally fallen asleep at the wheel. I want to play a little mashup for you. This is of President Biden and our Prime Minister, for the moment, Liz Truss. Now, what struck me, Tucker, about both leaders from these clips is, A, the extraordinary delusion that they are somehow doing a brilliant job. But secondly, how do we get to a place where America and the UK, two of the great countries of the world, where there is such a paucity of talent available in the political arena, you end up with these kind of leaders who, by common consent, are at best mediocre, and certainly in the case of our Prime Minister right now of just 6 weeks, completely and utterly useless.
That is the obsession of my life. How did great and impressive countries filled with hundreds of millions of great and impressive people wind up led by the worst among them? And look, I mean, I think we should start with the obvious, which is that democracy is not real in the West. The majority doesn't get what it wants consistently over time. Obviously, that's how you know. Leadership makes all the difference. If you have good leaders, you've got prosperous, happy, stable countries. And if you don't, you have the opposite. So leadership really matters. Clearly, the systems that we have had in place post-war for the last 80 years to raise up talent and put it in positions to rule over the rest of us, that system is very flawed. It's producing instead short-sighted day traders who have no real investment in the countries they lead, no long-term vision for those countries, and no moral strength. They're weak, and weak leadership in the home as in the nation results in disaster. If you have parents who can't make a decision, you know, you have kids who are out of control. And the same is true in nations. And that's what we're seeing. But we need a total revamp of the system in the UK. I would say in the whole Anglosphere. I would add New Zealand, Australia, Canada to that list, because those are the countries that have fallen the farthest, the English-speaking world. All those countries need to rethink how they're raising up leaders, because it's not working.
No. I mean, I saw an extraordinary clip of the weekend of President Biden munching an ice cream, which is never a good look for a man actually in public. But also what he said was so extraordinary. Let's take a look at it again.
Well, it's predictable. I mean, I wasn't the only one that thought it was a mistake. Anyway, I just think I disagreed with the policy, but that's up to Great Britain to make that judgment, not me.
And what I loved about this, Tucker, was President Biden, who is presiding over a shambolic economy in America, again, by common consent, taking the high moral ground as if somehow he's some great economic guru. The British Prime Minister is completely clueless. Well, I don't disagree with him, but I don't think he's in a position to say that, frankly, given what's going on here. But again, he clearly believes he's absolutely nailing it, when in fact what he is doing is nailing most people's bank balances.
Well, I think that's exactly right. You have this weird cycle, and you see it, again, all over the English-speaking world. You see it in New Zealand, maybe most clearly. This idyllic country with virtually no big problems run really into the ground by leaders who not only don't care about the future of the country they run, but are totally unwilling to acknowledge their failures. It is this kind of syndrome where the more exposed they are as ineffective and incompetent, and in some cases, I would say sinister, the more tightly they cling to the fiction that everything is great. It really is, you know, in the old cliche, the band on the deck of the Titanic. I mean, they're going to play their music until they sink beneath the waves. This is a disaster. Like if you ran your personal life this way, you would have no real relationships. If you made a mistake and never admitted it, and no, it's always your fault, you would be without friends. You know, no one could bear to be with you. But that's what they're like.
The big question, I think, for British viewers in particular about America right now is what is going to happen with Donald Trump? What do you think is going to happen? Is he going to run again for president? And if he did, would that be a good or bad thing for the Democrats?
Well, I think that the Democratic Party has re-energized Donald Trump and his voters by sicking the Department of Justice on him and raiding his home, which they did in August. And I think that reminded people that maybe the thing they like best about Trump is how much he is hated by the people in charge. That really is his great strength. They hate him. I don't know if he's going to run or not. I keep hearing that he is and that he will announce by the end of this year, 2022. I can't confirm that. I don't think, however, that the people currently in charge will sit by and allow that to happen if they can help it. I mean, I really think they plan to hound Trump into dropping out of politics forever. He's not because he's some sort of threat to the federal bureaucracy. No, Trump's threat, is that he's willing to say what he really thinks. He is uncontrolled, and they hate that.
That's completely true. We've got a banner at the moment saying Tucker Carlson Uncensored. Quite clearly, you've never been censored. I'm not entirely sure I have, but we call the show Piers Morgan Uncensored anyway. On censorship, on free speech, I think I share your belief it's probably never been under greater attack than it is today. Yes. And in a way, the kind of illiberal liberals are behaving like the very fascists they profess to hate. And they want to dictate how we should all be thinking and what we should all be saying. And the consequences, if we don't sign up to this kind of ultra-woke worldview, is that you get shamed, vilified and cancelled. But my question for you is not that, because I think we agree about how insidious this is to society. But where is your line for this? And in particular, I'll give an example in the news recently of Alex Jones, the shock jock. I've had a few run-ins with him before. This whole case of the Sandy Hook families who sued him and got nearly $1 billion. What did you make of that? Did you feel that he crossed a line which should not be acceptable, even if you believe passionately in free speech, that if you basically spew lies, which I think he knew to be lies, for massive commercial gain, and inflict endless new misery on grieving families to the extent they get death threats and so on, did he cross a line?
Well, sure. I mean, I would never defend it. I mean, to the extent I understand what he said, which I don't really, but I mean, clearly he said things that wounded, that hurt the feelings of the Sandy Hook families, and that's bad, and I would never defend that. I live in a country where the people with actual power, not Alex Jones, but the people who run the Federal Reserve and the federal government and the Pentagon lie every single day about things that really, really matter. They lied about the coronavirus for 2 years and really destroyed the American economy and killed people. And they were never held to account. The Federal Reserve shaved 30% off the value of the US dollar, and nobody was indicted. So, like, yes, I'm against lying. I try not to engage in it myself. I really do try, actually. But people do lie, and it's sort of a hierarchy of crime here. I mean, like, the people who tell the biggest lies get to remain on television spewing their self-righteousness, and the people at the margins who criticize them, who get caught lying, are silenced. So this is censorship. Censorship only benefits the people in power. It's always an attack on the weak, always. That's what this is. They use the civil code, civil lawsuits, to silence people they don't like. It's happened to me. Thankfully, I work for a big company, Fox, which has defended me. But if I didn't, you know, I'd be silenced and impoverished because they would sue me for lying and hurting people, and words are violence. The truth is, words are not violence. Violence is violence. Shooting people is bad. They don't have a problem with that. Our murder rate in American cities has gone up 40% in a year thanks to their policies. They don't care. They don't care about actual violence. What they care about is any threat to their hegemony, to their power. And Alex Jones, I guess, they thought presented some threat to that, so they crushed him. I mean, that's what's really going on. And I say that as someone who does, you know, I don't think you should, like, criticize the families of children who were murdered. Obviously, I think that's in very bad taste, but it's not violence.
The other person that we're debating later on the show who has an issue with the truth, and in particular in espousing truthful statements, is Meghan Markle. The debate we're going to be having is whether Americans have had their fill of the Duchess of Sussex. As an American, do you have a view?
Well, I always thought she was ridiculous, and I felt sorry for the Brits. I mean, I am, you know, I guess by birth, partly English. I mean, my ancestors came from there, and so I don't follow it super carefully, but I love your literature, and I've always admired your culture, and I'm, you know, broadly speaking, I guess, sympathetic to the continuity that the royal family represents. And so from my perspective as an American, I look at Meghan Markle and I'm like, this is a bad idea. Why? How did you fall for that? This chick's from LA. She's a failed actress. She's clearly acting out of bad intent. She wants to destroy things she didn't build. And I just never understood why anyone, I mean, I thought she was like a ridiculous narcissist from the first words I heard emerge from her mouth. Like, it never occurred to me to take her seriously. And I watched with shock as you got fired over calling her to account for an obvious lie. And then I watched as one of your friends got fired for trying to defend you.
Right.
I just interviewed her the other day. The whole thing was so insane. Historians will write about this.
It was preposterous. Tucker, great to have you on the program. Thank you very much for taking the time. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
All the best.